Good evening. Welcome to the ShadowTrader video weekly for Sunday, July 22nd, 2018. It's Jumbotron week is the title of this video, but I've also got some other nuanced nuggets to share with you. Calling it is Jumbotron week, of course, because of a lot of Jumbotrons reporting next week. We'll get to that in a moment. The first thing we've got to talk about is another poor high in the S&Ps, and by that I mean by the S&P futures. This was the poor high here that we talked about in last week's video, and we had these flat tops here. I kept saying there was lack of excess, and this week the market advanced and did the same exact thing. Again, lack of excess, lack of excess. So what does this tell you? That short-term longs have bad location up in this area. What it does is causes the market to back off a little bit off of those poor highs, but eventually you want to carry forward those poor highs because they should get repaired. Not always, but they should. Generally, the market will not end without some sort of excess on the top. We haven't had an excess high in a little bit, so that tells me that the rally should not be over, at least for now. One of the things that I did put on this chart, which is important, is the key breakout level, as I called it, which is the 280625, and I just called it that because we were moving up over this little flat top here. And what's interesting about it is we then backed off a little bit in here, and then we had this day where we gapped down, but then just drilled higher, right back up through, and took that out. And then notice that the market actually spent some time resolving that area there. Kind of a lot of value there, a lot of value there as well. So that area could be key next week in the 2806. But overall, I think it's interesting that the overnight low here between Thursday night and Friday's session is the low in the futures. What really matters, where the most import is what happens in the RTH session. That stands for regular trading hours. And in the regular trading hours sessions back to back, value has just been absolutely unchanged. And they haven't been able to take the market lower. So that also is a tell in and of itself, because one could look upon this key level here as a look above and fail, right? You could say, well, look above, and why didn't we go higher? We failed back down through that level, but everything that happened below that level has really just been very minor liquidation breaks. This one happened overnight. Here you can see there's a little bit of a spike lower, and Friday's action really had no break. It was just a choppy back and forth fest and ended up with a very symmetrical profile, which was all inside of Thursday's range. So not a lot happening here in the bigger picture. I'm still seeing that 2830 in the S&P as possible target. All right, as I said, big week for Jumbotron earnings. We are going to have Google on Monday. That's after the close, so be aware of that. And then Facebook on Wednesday, also in the PM. And then the mighty Amazon is going to be on Thursday. So just be aware. What does this mean? This will basically shake up the NQs a little. I think the NQs look just fine here. I'm still keeping these channels here intact where I foresee prices should be going, and then I think there's probably a pretty big short to be had here. Kind of probably would be nice if it leads us into the September Fed, right? There's going to be a Fed meeting September, and there's a little bit of chatter out there that, you know, what would happen if they were to change course and actually not raise rates and actually do what everybody is expecting. You would think it would be bullish for equities, but it may not be, but it would be good if it tied in with that sort of catalyst, but I don't know. But for now, it looks like we're slowly kind of just moving there. In the ES and in the SPX cash, the 2830 that I talked about is, of course, also the top of a channel, and it's right here as well. And these daily candles also obviously show us a different picture from what we see in the profile. They don't tell us as much, but you can obviously see that the same little balancing days that I showed you in the profile is what we had. Is what we're having in the candlestick charts as well, and we're looking for the push here to the 2830. All right. One of the things you also see here that I said is that the Russell has muscle, and the reason I say that is because the pattern in the rut is just so bullish. There is this classic double top here, but then once the second high was put in, right, first thing you want to note is this move down comes to where? Right to the 50 MA. So you have this perfect touch on this technical level, and then this move is 100% retracement. And then interestingly enough, this move is like less than half. So what am I expecting here is that we retest this 1703-ish or whatever it is, just over 1700, and we push a little bit higher in the Russell. Obviously, the Russell has been getting a lot of love lately because, remember, these smaller non-multinational corporations are or should be immune to the tariff talk, right? But even that feels to me like the market is kind of shrugging off the tariff talk. There was talk today that it's going to be even higher than the 200 billion, that whatever 500 or some nonsense, but the market does not seem. The market is either calling the bluff of Washington, or it doesn't it doesn't see it as a threat. But regardless, the Russell is obviously the beneficiary of that sort of thing because these companies shouldn't be affected. So watch the Russell this week and see what happens. If we get to here and touch, then I think it sets it up for a move. I'm thinking at least to about 1730-ish in the rut, and obviously that's going to pull everything up along with it. All right. Trade ideas, not too many, but I'm going to give you a few charts that you should be looking at. You should be looking at Adobe, which is really clean. They don't report till late. Their report is like way out here. You have plenty of time to play this even with options. I like the back-to-back dojis here where it hasn't moved, still holding the trend line. Obviously, it's a breakout play. What you would be looking for here is about 270, honestly. No more than $10. And I'll tell you why. I went back on this chart and I looked at levels where the stock kind of broke out from horizontal areas before it died. And if you look at it, it's funny. It goes like 10 bucks before it dies. It eventually goes higher, right? But it has these little like $10 moves when it breaks out, here and like here when it takes out a prior high, basically. So I'm thinking about 270 on a breakout. And again, they're not going to report until way out in September 13th. So keep an eye on Adobe. That's also a very loved stock. IBD 50, which means that it's wonderful fundamentally. I also like Booking. This is classic H pattern here. They don't report till late as well. You know what happens with the H pattern. Even if there is some movement here, it's usually a fake out, and then the stock goes like this and breaks out. I'm thinking it could move to about 2050 to the middle of the channel for next week. That is Booking, and also I'm keeping an eye on Netflix as well, because this is a very, very interesting pattern here in that you have this big volume advance here on the gap down, and then little by little it's just kind of dribbling down. Anything can happen, but it's pretty rare that a candle like this would get 100% retraced unless the market is really, really bullish. It could happen, but we'll see. And if so, then I'll be looking for the low of this bar as kind of a re-entry point, right? If the market goes actually down, it comes back up, and then that sets up the big short covering rally there to the trend line. All right, so that's just some stocks that are in focus for the coming week. Again, Jumbotron earnings are on tap, and be aware that the high thus far has been poor, and the back off has already happened. Remember, the poor high has two important components to it. The first is that prices will back off from the poor high. Why? Because short-term traders have poor location and they're stuck up there. And then the second move is that the poor high should be repaired, meaning that you'll get that excess or a print on the market profile that'll trade up through that poor high. So we'll see if we get that this week. If the Jumbotrons are good, that could do it. Remember, it doesn't take much. If any of these Jumbotrons decide to gap up on their number, I mean, so far all we've seen is Netflix, but if we get a good print from Google, we get a good print from Facebook and Amazon, forget about it. It's going higher. You know what I'm saying? All right. On behalf of myself and the entire ShadowTrader team here in beautiful Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, wishing you good trading and good night.